We do have this decision. We're waiting for the content of it. It's 92 pages long. It's no surprise that Judge Arthur Engoron has found the former President Donald Trump liable in this case. This is a civil case, so this is about money, not about criminality, just to rewind a little bit here, because there are a lot of different cases to keep track on. But in this case, Letitia James said when she was running for Attorney General that she was going to get Trump. And we're going to play some of what she said in a moment here. But the decision is in. It's 92 pages long. James asked for $370 million in damages. She also wants him to be prevented from doing business in New York State. So as we wait to download all of this and get a look at the number, and as soon as we get it, we'll tell you exactly what it is. Obviously, this is something that the former president is watching extremely closely. He has layers of judicial dates, appointments, decisions coming down, all in the middle of the South Carolina primary, which is coming up on February the 24th, and Super Tuesday. So all of this interwoven for former President Trump. I want to bring in Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary and Fox News contributor, and Shannon Bream, Fox News Sunday anchor and our chief legal correspondent. Shannon, let me start with you. So no surprise, obviously, that he was found liable because the judge found him liable before this case began, correct?
Correct. And we are now looking at this. Of course, I jetted to the bottom to see what we can find in the conclusion. And there are several big numbers in there. The judge talks about in this finding Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Allen Weisselberg, and others involved in this, as you said, had already decided that they had been fraudulent in some way. One of the first things he orders is that several of them together, including Donald Trump, and his trust and Trump organization will be have to pay $168 million and change. The next paragraph goes on to say that there's another ruling for $126 million and change. Another one for $60 million. Now, we'll have to look and see if any of those are overlapping or if we add these up. But these are some of the numbers coming out. Goes on to say that Eric Trump has to pay $4 million in one case, Donald Trump Jr. $4 million in one of these cases, and Allen Weisselberg $1 million. So there's a lot there. We're going to parse through these numbers, but they are big. Incredible. We knew there was a big ask. It looks like they may be in the neighborhood of close to $300 million or more.
Yeah, Shannon, you know, we are seeing this. I believe this is a Reuters report. We're all trying to sort of balance up these numbers here. But according to some of the reporting out there, the number is $354.9 million. And as you say, the damages are spread across a number of the Trump family members who are deeply involved in the business. Don Jr., Eric Trump, as you say, $4 million. Now, perhaps equally importantly, according to the early reporting that we're seeing here, the judge has banned Donald Trump and others from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation or other legal entity in New York for 3 years, is the period here on this. Now, that wouldn't have a whole lot of impact on President Trump because he is running for president and hopes to be president during that time. But Eric Trump and Don Jr. and Eric, in a large way, are very instrumental in the business here, and it would prevent them from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation or other legal entity in New York for 2 years. So $355 million here in the judgment from Arthur Engoron against the former President Donald Trump. Ari, what's your reaction to all this?
You know, Martha, I just have such a hard time seeing any of the court cases, including this one, as anything other than a continuation of the resistance that began when Donald Trump was elected president, and instantly protesters took to the streets of Fifth Avenue against Donald Trump. To me, when you look at all these cases, the one thing they keep having in common is they're being brought against the former president in the bluest of blue counties across the United States of America. Because if they were brought in a purple county, let alone a red county, they probably would have no chance of success, whether it was a jury or a judge rendering a verdict. And so I just think this is a continuation of the nastiness that law has turned into to serve the political ends, as Letitia James, as you pointed out, the Attorney General of New York, campaigned on getting Donald Trump. And I remember when she said that. I'm a New Yorker. I remember when she was a candidate and she vowed to do that. And it struck me as an absolute miscarriage of justice then when she made the promise. And now that she's delivered on it, it's an even bigger miscarriage.
This also, the judge says that the Trump organization must install an independent director of compliance and says its independent monitor shall continue in her role, it says, for at least 3 years. Shannon, of all the cases that have come against the former president, this one, I would say, and the hush money Stormy Daniels case, sort of was problematic in terms of the interpretation of a lot of people who study the law, as you do. Now, in this case, none of the banks came forward. None of these real estate investment companies came forward and said that the Trump organization failed to repay them. They claimed that the Mar-a-Lago estate, for example, was, I believe, worth $18 million, which is preposterous for anybody who's looked for, a cottage in Palm Beach. You couldn't get one of those in that neighborhood. So, it's really shocking how political this appears to be in going after him. Let's play those Letitia James comments when she was running for to be the Attorney General. Watch this.
No one is above the law, including this illegitimate president. I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing him, defending your rights, and then going home.
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the
Oh my gosh.
He's going to know my name personally.
Every time I see that, Shannon, it's pretty shocking behavior from someone who, wants to be an attorney general.
Yeah, and in the line she has there about nobody is above the law, his folks will say nobody's below it either. You cannot simply use the law as a cudgel and go after somebody in a way that appears political. This lends credence to the argument that President Trump makes over and over, that it's not just a prosecution, these are persecutions. And his base is going to rally to that every time this happens. We got to remember, too, that as you noted there, and as he continues to note, there weren't, quote, victims here. There weren't people that came forward and demanded justice from the Attorney General. So in New York, even though we're referring to this as the Supreme Court, they have unusual language that they use in New York. It's not their final court of appeal. Their court of appeals is actually above their state Supreme Court. So the Trump team feels like on so many different counts, they've got a really strong measure on appeal. No doubt that they're going to take every penny of this to appeal. So what happens in the meantime? A lot of this has been put on hold, taking the business licenses and those kinds of things. So we'll see how they do on appeal, but no doubt that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, Ari, when you evaluate your own properties for the purpose of insurance or the purpose of getting a loan from a bank, it comes basically with language that says this is our assessment, then the banks step in, they do their assessment on how much the property is valued. And in none of those cases involving the Trump organization did any of these parties bring any litigation against the Trump organization for any false representation, correct?
No, that is exactly right. And nobody has ever accused any of these New York bankers or insurance people of being behind the ball. I mean, these guys are pretty sharp at what they do, and they know how to sharpen their pencils. So all of this is why I put this in the political category, not a legal category. And it's one of the reasons the norms have broken down in this country. Because when the Democrats go to these kind of resorts to get somebody they don't like, we all lose faith in the system. It's the same thing as 2 impeachments that violated the rules of the House. It's all just to get the man they don't want. And the perverse result of it is they're going to get the man they don't want. As a result of all these prosecutions, Donald Trump leapfrogged in the Republican nomination. If they had really wanted to get rid of Trump, they wouldn't have prosecuted him, and then Ron DeSantis actually may have had a chance back in January of 2023. But these indictments led to the rallying of the base because it made people question justice, which has been a 4-year pattern when Donald Trump was president. So it's the most foolish thing the Democrats could do unless they want Donald Trump to return to power.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, ignoring some of this might have produced a different outcome. When you think about 91 indictments against this individual, and Shannon, just looking at other civil cases which have a monetary price tag on them. As I said, this is not a criminal case that he was in here. I looked back. O.J. Simpson was found civilly liable in the deaths of 2 people. His wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, who was at the property at the time, $33 million in the deaths of 2 human beings in one of the most high-profile cases in American history.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, there were clearly victims in that case, which keeps going back to this argument about nobody complained. Everybody got paid back in this case. So regardless of how you feel about the outcome, when the president, former president, and his supporters have this argument that it's political, it certainly looks that way, especially with the clips that you played earlier. Now, something interesting to note, we had out new Fox polling this week. You and I on the road have talked to folks in New Hampshire and Iowa and everywhere in between who've said they would not move away from President Trump if he was indicted or convicted. Now, there is some softening there if he's convicted on a criminal charge. But this new polling we have out of critical states, New Hampshire and Michigan this week, found that more Biden supporters are worried about his mental acuity than Trump supporters are worried about his legal issues. Right. So again, this will rally most of the base to him. It forced all of his GOP rivals to run to his defense every time he was indicted. And as Ari points out, I mean, it cleared the field in a very different way. But voters say, for the majority of Trump supporters, it's not going to move them. They're not going to waver in the face of verdicts like this.
No, you're absolutely right, Shannon. There's no indication in any of the polling that this has a negative impact on the Trump campaign. And if anything, it has a positive impact, because when they see him under attack in some element of their own lives, many people feel like they understand what it's like to be under the thumb of the government or of the law in one way or the other. And they rally to him and support him, which has been just a fascinating political phenomenon to watch.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.